Good evening, everyone. I'm Rabbi Sam Blumberg. Just want to welcome everyone this evening and to say what a blessing it is that we're all together for this evening of memory and sharing. And thank you to Dr. LIZKOR and to Graham for being with us this evening. I just want to mention, we have a wonderful intergenerational evening that we have our upper school students in 8th, 9th, and 10th grade who are with us this evening for this time of learning. So what a blessing it is for us to be all together. I'm going to invite forward the chair of our LIZKOR to Remember Committee, Ellie Ann Binder, to say a few words and get us started.
Thank you, Rabbi. Welcome to everyone who's with us here tonight and all of you on Zoom. As we begin our 4th year of LIZKOR, we remember, we are very proud of the many stories of survival of second-generation families, of American POW experiences, and so many more that we've already heard and recorded. Our commitment is to continue to record the stories firsthand for the 3rd and 4th generations, and we really welcome the students that are with us tonight. The mission of LIZKOR is to never forget, and we will continue to record and hear as many stories as we can find. If you have a story about the Shoah, please be in touch with us to talk about participating in LIZKOR. Just call the temple office and leave your information, and you can be assured I will be in touch. In that context, tonight's program is the story of Dr. LIZKOR, who writes about his parents and their journey from concentration camps to America. I have read the book. It is called A Blessing, Not a Burden. It is compelling, very readable, and heartwarming on many levels. We have copies here. They are for sale if you would like to purchase one at the end of the program. And so now let's begin. I would like to introduce the co-author, Graham Honecker, of this book, A Blessing, Not a Burden.
Well, good evening. It is really an honor to be here and to speak to such a great audience. I'm going to be very brief. This is not my story. It's the story of Dr. Kor and his family. There's one main reason I'm up here introducing Alex to set the stage for how this project took off, but more importantly, this book came out in May of 2024. It's now in its 4th printing. I'm very grateful to my mother who's bought so many copies to make that possible. But we have lectured all over the country and even over in Europe on this project. And as we were beginning our lecture circuit, I said to Alex, look, I don't need to be up there with you. This is your story, your family's story. And he stopped me and he said, no, it's very important that you are up here with me because I'm not Jewish. I have many Jewish friends. My best friend here is Jewish. I don't know if he would say the feeling is mutual. I would hope so. He really felt it important that as a person of non-Jewish faith that we present this project from a multi-faith foundation and platform. Alex and I connected about 11 years ago. I work at Butler University on the fundraising side. Butler is in Indianapolis. Alex is an alum. We met about 11 years ago. I went out seeking a check for the university. I still haven't received it yet. I'm waiting for that. But we met over dinner in Baltimore, and it was there that I learned this unbelievable story of his mother who survived Auschwitz, survived as a Mengele twin, and went on this 50-year path to forgiveness, which you're going to hear about. What I didn't know that night is that Alex's father had his own incredible tale of surviving multiple camps in the Holocaust, narrowly escaped death, and ended up in this strange place called Terre Haute, Indiana. From that point, from that night, Alex and I have had this friendship over 10 years. We've done a lot of work to commemorate his parents' messages and legacies. And one of the biggest ones, and I'd encourage you to go on YouTube and find this, we had Mrs. Kaur speak at Butler University in 2015 at our commencement. And we had 1,000 graduates there in the audience, and she told her tale, again, of from Auschwitz to Indiana to forgiveness, but she looked our graduates in the eyes and she said, when you go home tonight, I want you to hug your parents. Not just because they paid a lot of money and invested in you to go to college, but because when I, quote unquote, graduated from Auschwitz, when it was liberated, I was looking around for my parents and they weren't there. And Alex was sitting in the front row and she called him up and she said, now I'd like to give my son a hug. Okay, that's been 10 years ago and I still get chills telling that story. We went on to create a scholarship in her memory, worked on a documentary, and then in 2023 we began this journey of writing a book. Alex is the son of 2 Holocaust survivors. And before I turn it over to him, again, I just want to share a couple of my motivations for this project. Again, coming from a different faith. I'm not in Alex's shoes, but I become so frustrated with the anti-Semitism and the bigotry and the hatred in this world. And hopefully this project makes a difference to those who read the book. Secondly, to the youth in the audience, I have 2 relatively young children, 2 teenagers who hopefully are studying right now back in Indianapolis. But the studies are frightening about how little your generation knows about the Holocaust, and I'm so glad you're here with us tonight. Third reason, to recognize Alex's own incredible story, which you'll hear this evening. And then finally, Alex and I were at lunch not too long ago with a friend of ours who's mutual friend who's Jewish, and he looked at me and he said, Graham, why are you involved in these projects? And I hadn't really thought about it, but I thought later that night back to my wife's father, who grew up, was not Jewish, but grew up in Nazi Germany. He was born in Munich, Germany in the 1930s. He was forced to become a Hitler Youth. Family got out of Germany after the war, and he went on to become a very successful businessman in Chicago and fought against discrimination. So that's a tribute to him in my own way, but the reminder is that we all have a tie to the past. Be it good, be it bad, what are we going to learn from the past, and how are we going to take it to the future? So it's now my privilege to introduce Dr. Kaur, who's a very good friend of mine, a podiatrist back in Indianapolis, and the proud son of Eva Kaur and Mickey Kaur. Thank you again for having us.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here. I want to thank Courtney in the back and Ellie and Rabbi and everybody here. So, as Graham said, I am a full-time podiatrist. 6, 7, 8 years ago, I never thought I'd be doing this. My mom would lecture around the world. I would here and there go kind of hang out and see her. July 2nd, 2019, we're during one of our trips to Auschwitz. Had about 100 people, and it's at night, and my mom was playing on her social media. And I said, Mom, you're 85 years old. At what point are you going to start slowing down? She had some health problems, and I said, you're giving over 200 lectures a year. And she looked at me like I had 2 heads, and she said, Alex, what are you talking about? There's so much hate and anti-Semitism and bigotry and racism in the world. Unfortunately, my work is needed more than ever. This is July 2nd, 2019. Unfortunately, in that same room, 2 days later, my mom died during our trip. And so I never had the opportunity to ask my mom what my role should be. And so I always think back to that conversation, and that's kind of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. So tonight, over the next 45 minutes or so, hopefully you'll be inspired. Hopefully you'll be motivated. Don't be surprised if you cry. I usually cry. But my parents had this incredible sense of humor. And despite the subject matter that we have that we're going to talk about, and it's not easy for me to talk about, it's definitely not easy for you to hear, But despite the subject matter, I think I would be doing my parents a big, big disservice if I didn't allow the audience to appreciate my parents' sense of humor. So don't be surprised if here and there you laugh, because I can't make up some of these stories. They're truly funny, even in the light of what we're going to talk about. A lot of people ask, what's the purpose or what's the reason of the title, A Blessing, Not a Burden? You know, all of us are kind of a subject of our past. So we're all a victim of our past, or we use that past to better ourselves. When I was 26 years old, I was in podiatry school, and I knew I was having a health issue. I was diagnosed with cancer. And some of you know the Tour de France winner, Lance Armstrong. Well, I have something in common with Lance Armstrong. I didn't win the Tour de France. I didn't date Sheryl Crow, and I definitely didn't do PEDs. But we had the same diagnosis, the same cancer. And so I was feeling sorry for myself, 26 years old in Chicago. And my mom kept on leaving me voicemails. And I hit delete, delete, delete. And then one got through, and she said, look, I know you're there. You're feeling sorry for yourself. You need to understand something. Your dad survived something terrible. He's a survivor. I'm a survivor. You're going to be a survivor. This is your Auschwitz. And when you hear those words, I think it's important, or at least it was important for me, to say, okay, I need to quit feeling sorry for myself, and I need to get on with my life. And I truly believe, and perhaps this is a lesson for the young people, you know, when at some point in your life something bad's going to happen. Hopefully not like I had, and hopefully not like my parents had. But I found that I needed that inner strength and that perseverance. And for me, that was my mom saying that you can survive this. And I truly believe that it made it much easier for me to get through that process. And so I'm going to take you on a little tour. So I am the son of 2 Holocaust survivors, at least in the Midwest and throughout the country. A lot of people know my mom's story, but they don't know my father's story. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my dad's story. And then we're going to switch subjects and talk about my mom, and then we'll talk about me and kind of put it all together for you. And then hopefully you can ask me some questions and ask Graham some tougher questions. My dad's from Riga, Latvia, one of the Baltic states. It's the old Soviet Union. He was from a very, very religious Jewish family. There were 3 older brothers. My grandfather, believe it or not, was a shoe cobbler. So you must think, I guess shoes and feet kind of run in the family. I told you I'm a podiatrist. And so the summer of 1941, the Nazis invade Riga, and my grandfather's wearing very traditional Jewish garb, and restrictions were already in place. Jews were being told where to stand, where to work, where to eat, etc. And so my grandfather was on his way to work as a shoe cobbler. The Nazis see him, and unfortunately, they tell him to go to the other side of the street, and he keeps on walking, and unfortunately, they killed him. My dad's second oldest brother, around the same time, was on a ship, was in the Latvian Navy, was a navigator, and unfortunately, he had the same result. So by the time my dad's 15 years old, by the fall of 1941, he had lost his father and his second oldest brother. And so the family, again, very religious, was taken from their home to a ghetto. Now, most of us in this audience know it's not like a ghetto that we hear about in a big city. It's a ghetto that is for Jews, and it's surrounded by barbed wire. No minimal food, minimal shelter. My grandmother, Mirka, wanted my dad, who was 15, to still have some semblance of being Jewish. So when they're taken from their home, she put the tablecloth from their house in her skirt. When I heard the story, when I was not much older than these kids, I asked my dad, why did she put the tablecloth in her skirt? And he said, well, for Shabbat dinner, even though there was no table and no silverware, my grandmother wanted my father in particular, because he was the youngest, to have Shabbat dinner. And it was important for her to have that same tablecloth in the ghetto. And so the two older brothers, Shlomo and Leo, along with my father and their mother, were in the ghetto. And at one point, they're going to evacuate the ghetto. What does that mean? They're going to decide who's going to live and who's not going to live. So they put on one side of the ghetto men and younger men, middle-aged men and younger men that could work. On the other side of the ghetto, women, young children, and elderly. And my dad was 15 years old at the time, and he looked very young for his age, and he was kind of a mama's boy. And so he went to the side of the ghetto with his mother. My grandmother knew what was going to happen to that group. And so she told my dad, "You go with your brothers." And my dad said, "No, I want to stay with you regardless of what happens." Well, my grandmother won the argument. My dad went with his two brothers. And unfortunately, on November the 30th, 1941, that side of the ghetto was taken to an area, and unfortunately there was a massacre. So now my dad's with his two brothers, and they're taken from, in a short period of time, into another camp called Kaiserwald. And now this is 1942 and into 43. They're then taken to a camp called Stutthof. Stutthof was a very, very bad camp. Not many people survived. En route to Stutthof, my dad's third oldest brother, Shlomo, escaped and made it his way to the future Jewish homeland of Israel. For the next 2 years, my father was with brother Leo, and they were in Stutthof, and then they were taken down into Germany to Buchenwald. And my dad and my uncle could sense by 1944, early 1945, that the Nazis were losing the war. My father would say he didn't like the Nazis when they were winning the war. Sure as heck didn't like them when they were losing the war. And so they're now on a march, and they're being told that they're being taken to a safer area. The rumor was that this area was being liberated by the Americans. There was fighting in the distance. And so my father thought, well, at some point, I may also be like my mother and not make it. And so my dad and my uncle Leo were in a march, and they're going around a ravine, and my dad sees a break between two of the Nazis. When my dad would lecture years later to kids your age, everything was sports analogies, and you'll find out why in a second. So my dad decided to make a run for it. And at the time when my dad started lecturing, the Indianapolis Colts had a running back named Edgerrin James. So my father ran and ran and ran, and he would say he ran like Edgerrin James was running to dodge tacklers. So he ran and he ran. My uncle Leo stayed in the line. They shot at my father, they missed. He hid in a building, ruins of a building. And then for the next several hours, there's fierce fighting. And my dad's got lice all over him. His clothes are in shambles. And then there's silence. And he didn't know what to do. He's hiding in the ruins of a building in the hole in the ground. And then he hears a weird language. And my dad was great with languages. He knew it wasn't Hebrew, it wasn't Latvian, it wasn't German. And he thought, well, maybe it's the Americans. So he came up with his hands up. Two American GIs, one Wendell Knox from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, gave my father a Coca-Cola. When I was a little kid, I didn't know what Pepsi was. We had Coca-Cola breakfast, lunch, and dinner. My dad drank the Coca-Cola, and Mr. Knox said, "How's it feel to be free?" My dad knew the word free, and he said, "Good." My dad always thought of Coca-Cola like a champagne. For the next 2 days, Mr. Knox and his fellow GI hid my dad from this gentleman, Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Neff. On the third day, Mr. Neff was an engineer by trade. This battalion was primarily building bridges, and Mr. Neff finds out about my dad. And so Mr. Neff kind of interrogates my dad, questions my dad. And he realizes very quickly that my father knew multiple languages, could be a translator as they navigated the various villages, and he also knew the terrain. So Mr. Neff thought, well, he's not going to be a liability. He's going to be a major asset. So they put my father into American GI clothes. One funny story, the day my dad was liberated was April the 15th, 1945. Years later, my birthday is April 15th. We didn't know this, Graham and I, until we started doing a lot of research with the book. So for the next several weeks in 1945, my dad's with the GIs. He's reading a military newspaper. Some of you may know, Stars and Stripes. And he is picking up English, and he feels like one of the Americans. And then they get to a dangerous area, and Mr. Neff says, Mickey, I've got no choice. I've got to put you in a refugee camp. And my father by now had really become one of the guys. They were all, my dad was 19 or 20, the same age as the GIs. And so my dad looks at Mr. Neff and says, I want to go where you're from, wherever this Terre Haute, Indiana place is. So my father is put in a refugee camp, and he starts writing letters. And one of the letters ends up on the doorstep of Mrs. Neff in Terre Haute, Indiana. By now, Mr. Neff is in Great Britain. She telegrams her husband and says, you got to help that little boy. He wants to come to Terre Haute. And so my father starts writing these letters. You can't see it, but this is a Coca-Cola malt. They're in a bar in Vienna, Austria. And he's hanging out with the GIs for a better part of a year, helping them in any way he can. And then he starts writing letters to Mr. Neff. My dad's 4 years of high school were 4 years in concentration camp and ghettos. So now Mr. Neff's in Terre Haute thinking, well, he needs to get accepted into high school here in Terre Haute. So my father ultimately ends up in Terre Haute, Indiana. As I said earlier, my dad was born in Riga, Latvia, and loved to play soccer. Well, when he gets to Terre Haute, Indiana, nobody's playing soccer. And I kind of gave the punchline away. But when he gets to Terre Haute, Indiana, everybody's playing basketball. My dad on a good day, on a really good day, was 5'2". And so my father finishes 3 years of high school in 1 year, enrolls at the local university, and finds out that he's going to take the gym class. And the gym class is taught by Coach John Wooden. Some of you may know Coach Wooden, who he is. For those of you who don't, Coach Wooden was an All-American at Purdue University. This was his first college coaching job. And halfway through the semester, and I don't know about you kids, when I was in gym class, I didn't study at all. My dad studied in gym class, and Coach Wooden takes him aside halfway through the semester. He was a little older than the other freshmen. And he says, Mickey, you're such a good influence on these kids. You're going to get an A this semester, but I need you to take the class next semester because you're helping me so much. So they became friends. And he got an A the next semester. And then Coach Wooden, if you know history, gets a job at UCLA in California, wins 10 national titles. My dad gets accepted to pharmacy school in Purdue, which is in West Lafayette. Years later, in 1997, Coach Wooden was honored at Indiana State University. He was honored with some other guy. I don't know if you know who, a guy named Larry Bird. So Coach Wooden and Bird were being honored. My dad sat at Coach Wooden's table. They had not seen each other for about 50 years, my dad and Coach Wooden. And so when I was a little kid, just to give you an idea, we would get letters from Coach Wooden every October, November. Dear Mickey, I hope your family's doing good. I have this new player. His name's Lou Alcindor. I think he's going to be pretty good. So that's a little bit of the story of my father. So now we're going to switch and talk about my mother. And some of you may know my mother a little bit better than my dad. My mom also from a very religious Jewish family. My mother had two older sisters. My mother's father, who I'm named after, Alexander, was very, very religious and wanted to have a boy. So now my grandmother's pregnant again. The midwife comes to deliver. And with great anticipation, out comes a girl, Miriam. But then the midwife says, oh wait, there's another one coming. And with even greater disappointment in my grandfather's eyes, Eva is born. They're identical twins. As you can see the picture on the left, it's my mom and my aunt. They always dressed alike, looked alike. For whatever reason, my mom's almost always on the left side, almost all the pictures. And so my mom was always under the impression that her father really wanted her to be a boy. So anytime the girls got in trouble, she was the one that was punished. When my grandfather wanted to pray, my mom's job was to get all the animals. They lived on a farm. They were the only Jewish family. And she had the job to get all the cats and dogs away from him. And sure enough, what would happen, there would be one cat and interrupted my grandfather's prayer. And so my mom got punished. And my mom always was, when I was younger, would tell me these stories. And so one time, it's 1941. Now, if you compare stories of my two parents, by 1941, my dad was already in a ghetto or a camp. 1941 in Hungary, if you know history, things were still relatively normal. My mom went to school, but one time after dinner, the girls are put into her room, and my mom's maybe 7 years old, and her parents were listening to the radio. So my mom, kind of being the black sheep of the family, puts her ear to the door and hears somebody in German yelling about the Jews. It was Hitler. And my mom was not bashful, and she told, "Daddy, why don't we leave? We need to leave. Something bad's going to happen." And her father said, "Oh, stupid little girl, you don't know what you're talking about. You just do your chores and do your prayers and everything will be fine. Don't worry about this." Well, sure enough, the next year, their teacher gets replaced by more of a Nazi sympathizer. And this is probably 1943, and my mom and my aunt are in math class, maybe 8 years old, 7 years old. And the teacher says, if you have 5 Jews and you kill 2 Jews, how many Jews are left? Terrible. My mom and my aunt go home to complain to their mother, and their window of opportunity by now had vanished. There was a chance they could leave, and even a year earlier, my grandfather had gone to Palestine to see if things got bad, if there was an opportunity, should they leave? And when he came back, my grandmother said, "Well, how can we travel with these 2 twins?" But now, a year later, things got worse. And so my grandmother tells my mom and my aunt, "Well, we just have to take it. You have to take it. We're Jewish. We have no choice." And my mom always resented this. She couldn't understand. She thought her parents were there to protect her. So February, March of 44, they're taken from their home and put in a ghetto, similar to my dad's story. This is the picture on the right, the last picture of my mom and the family. The 2 little girls sitting down, left is my mom, right is my aunt. The lady in the black polka dot is my grandmother. My grandfather in the tall black coat, the 2 older sisters to his right and left. To the far right is a girl in a white dress. That was a family friend. She was not Jewish. And when they got to the ghetto, she would throw food across the barbed wire so the girls, my mom and her sisters, would have food. So at one point, the ghetto is liquidated, similar to what I told you with my father's story. And they're put on a cattle car. It's not really a train. It's a cattle car. They're standing. There's no bathroom. You can use your imagination. And about every 8 or 9 hours, the cattle car would stop, and through a little peephole, they would exchange gold watches for little spritz of water, a little bit of water. And this went on for 3 days, and always the exchange was in Hungarian. On the 4th day, the exchange was no longer in Hungarian, it was in German. My mom and her sisters and their parents knew this was not good. So sure enough, as the cattle car is now slowing down prematurely, my grandfather takes a family in the corner of the cattle car and says, "If anybody survives this place," they didn't know where they were going, but they knew we're in Germany, "you go to Israel." So the cattle car doors open. It's nighttime. My mom's 10 years old and my aunt's 10 years old. They couldn't see above the adults, but they could hear dogs barking, people screaming, just mass chaos. And as my mom and my aunt step off the cattle car onto the selection platform, They're holding on to their mother's arms. They step down, and my mom realizes, all of a sudden, she looks around. Her father's nowhere to be seen. Her two older sisters are nowhere to be seen. They've been swallowed up into the crowd. So my mom and my aunt are looking around, and all of a sudden they hear somebody yelling, running up and down, a Nazi running up and down the selectional platform, yelling, "Twins, twins," in German. They looked alike, they dressed alike, they were wearing red dresses. A Nazi approached my grandmother and said, "Are they twins?" And my grandmother said yes. And next thing, 3 Nazis jump out and pull my mom and my aunt from their mother. The last thing my mom remembers is her mother's arm as she's being dragged away. If my mom were here today, she would tell you one thing. This was one big regret. She didn't have a chance to say goodbye. She did not know this was the last time she would see her mother. She's 10 years old. And so they're taken from this selection platform, taken to a barracks. My mom's tattooed is A7063. My aunt's number is A7064. Just a little anecdotal story. When I was younger, I just thought my mom was old. Her number was always smudged, unclear. My aunt's number was always perfectly clear. And I think I was probably in the mid-80s. I asked my mom, "Why is your number not like Dota Miriam's, Aunt Miriam's?" And she said, "I don't know." So next time we go to Israel, they talk, and Miriam says, "Well, you don't remember? When you were being tattooed, it took 5 Nazis to hold you down. You were kicking and screaming and creating mass confusion." And my mom said, "Well, I must have blocked it out because I was raised to be a good Jewish girl, and good Jewish girls don't bite and kick." And so they are then taken, again, this is in May of 44, to a barracks where it's all female twins, ages 2 to 15. And my mom thinks she's landed on the moon. Again, she's 10 years old. And so they were raised to be kosher, and they're giving something that night. They hadn't eaten in 3 days, 3.5 days, and they're giving something that looks like bread. And my mom and my aunt announced to the rest of the twins, "Well, we're not eating this because we're kosher, and this is not kosher, and we're not eating this until we see our parents." Well, one of the older twins says, "Look, you better eat the bread because if you don't eat it, some of the rats will eat it or we'll steal it from you." So that was my mom's first experience, first night. The next morning, 5 in the morning, one of the entourage yells out, "Mengele's coming! Mengele's coming!" And in comes Dr. Josef Mengele. Mengele was a doctor at Auschwitz. He did experiments on twins. It's hard to see, but this list there, my mom's name is down on the list number 12 and 13 with my aunt. There were 3,000 twins, 1,500 sets of 2, boys and girls ages 2 to 15. What was the purpose of the experiments? There's a lot of things we can talk about. Well, to a twin, and I've probably met 80 or 90 twins over the years, they would tell you they thought they were being used in fertility experiments so that German mothers could mass produce a German race. There's a book out by David Marwell 6 years ago, and he disputes that. I'm a podiatrist, I'm not a geneticist, but his thought was if you're doing experiments to try to figure out how to make fertility drugs, you would probably test the mothers of the twins. The other big issue is, when we get flu shots, you sign a consent called informed consent. Well, none of the twins were given a choice. They had to be part of the experiments. And the other thing you need to keep in mind is that, most kids, if they were 10 years old, did not survive. The reason my mom survived, ironically, was that she was being used in medical experiments. So these experiments, and my mom got to Auschwitz in May of 44. A couple other stories here before we talk about this picture. In around August of 44, one day, there's no guard in front of the twins' barracks. And so my mom, it's a sunny day. August is similar to here in Massachusetts. And so it's hot out, so she takes a couple steps, 10 years old, looks up and sees a plane circling Auschwitz. On the back of the plane is an American flag. So when I heard this story, I was in my late 20s, and I said, Mom, wait a second. There's no TV. There's no internet, of course. How do you know it's an American flag? Well, Alex, it's real simple. When I was a little girl in Ports, Romania, we had an aunt in Cleveland, Ohio. Every 3 or 4 months, we would get letters from the aunt. I was a troublemaker. I opened up all the mail. On the envelope was an American flag. She put 2 and 2 together. Looking at the planes, she saw the stamp on the postage, the letter from the aunt. The reason I tell you this, and my mom would want this to be emphasized, she could no longer think like a 10-year-old. She had to think like an adult, because every day was an opportunity to live and another day to survive, another day to survive another experiment. And so she saw the plane, and this gave her hope. It was a reconnaissance plane circling Auschwitz. Years later, when she lectured, she met one of the pilots from that plane somewhere in Florida, in Gainesville, I think it was. So a couple other stories. The fall now. One time she's injected with something. She gets a bad fever, and Mengele looks at her and says, too bad, she only has 2 weeks to live. So she's separated from Aunt Miriam, Dada Miriam, and put in a barracks where people, in my mom's opinion, looked less alive than normal. People were crawling on the ground to get to a faucet. So my mom would see and find out about a faucet. I must survive. I must survive. So this went on for 4 weeks. Finally, her fever broke. During this time, when my mom was in the barracks, my aunt was in isolation. She was being injected with something. So when they're reunited after 4 weeks, my aunt looked just like the people in the barracks that my mom had just found. So my mom periodically, and by October, November, the Nazis were not as, sometimes the experiments were canceled, sometimes the Nazis were not in the guard towers. So one day my mom went with 2 other twins to organize potatoes. What's that? Steel potatoes from the kitchen, because my aunt needed the nutrition from the potatoes. So my mom and 2 other twins are in the kitchen putting potatoes in their skirt, and all of a sudden a Jeep pulls up, 2 Nazis, machine guns. The last thing my mom remembers is the rifle pointed at her head. She wakes up, she thinks she's in the hereafter. Unfortunately, she touches the other girls. They didn't make it. So my mom always told my sister and I that she had a guardian angel, and this is one of the reasons she told us this story, that we were kind of special and that she was special. And so now it's November, December, and like my father, they could sense the Nazis were losing the war. And at one point in January, they're taken from Auschwitz II-Birkenau to Auschwitz I by 2 Nazis. It was similar to my dad's march, and they run into the barracks. The Nazis run off because they were destroying the evidence. They were burning everything up. So now it's January 27th, 1945. It's hard to see a little bit, but the 2 girls in the front are my mom and my aunt. My mom on the left, my aunt on the right. This is a liberation video and picture from Auschwitz. If you remember one thing, this is actually not January 27th. Let me tell you the story. January 27th, they're in a barracks, block 23. My mom could not see outside the window because they just had a birthday. They were about to have a birthday. They're almost 11. And so one of the older twins says, we see something moving. It was the Ukrainian army dressed in white camouflage because it's snowing. And they see something moving, and maybe this is going to be the day we're going to be free. Sure enough, the Soviets, the Ukrainians, liberate Auschwitz. They give them candy and cookies and milk and honey. And then they said, look, we're coming back in a couple weeks. So the twins were on their own. And so a couple weeks later, they come back with big motion picture cameras. My mom loved attention to her dying day. When the video starts, my mom and my aunt are in the middle of the line. I theorize that she saw a camera and ran to the very front, so my mom and my aunt were at the front. This took 5 takes On the fifth take, like a typical 11-year-old, she sticks out her tongue like, okay, let's get on with this. I want to go home. The two girls, and I know it's tough to see, they look like they have hoodies. Those are scarves. Those are the Chengrid twins. To my knowledge, they're the only twins still alive in the world. They live in Israel. Their granddaughter is a pediatrics resident. I'm friends with her. And so the Chengrid twins' mother was good friends with my grandmother. So my mom and my aunt are in an orphanage. All they wanted to do was go home. In the orphanage, they had clean sheets. They had food. But the one thing my mom and my aunt missed was the parents' hug and kiss and love. And so finally, Mrs. Changre, the mother of the two twins, comes to the orphanage and signs them out and says she's an aunt, which was a lie. And then they end up finally, after 8 months, they get back to their home village, hoping against hope that their parents survived. Well, they're thinking they're 11 years old now. Surely their parents had to survive. They were grown-ups. They get to the house. The only thing that survived was a family dog. My mom would tell audiences the Nazis didn't kill dogs, but they killed people. And so my mom and my aunt then move in with an aunt in Cluj, Romania, a neighboring city. That aunt had lost some family members, and my mom asked her, will you give us a hug or a kiss? No, I don't do that. I just cook food for you and make sure you're safe. And so for the next 5 years, my mom had nightmares until 1950. And then in 1950, they get a visa to go to Israel. My mom remembered what her dad had told her. And so they get to Israel, and they're now teenagers. And they're living in a kibbutz, a commune. But I'm sure you know what a kibbutz is. You're shaking your head, yes, good. And so my mom was with other boys and girls ages 14, 15, and 16 in a kibbutz in Israel. Her nightmares go away. And I say, Mom, how was it living in a kibbutz with boys and girls 14, 15, and 16 from all over Europe? She said, Alex, it was the best time of my life. I learned how to say I love you in 10 languages. She liked boys. Good, you're still awake. And so my mom is in the Israeli army. She was a sergeant major. My aunt marries a Sabra, a native Israeli. My mom was dating a guy that she really loved. And so finally, once they're going to meet, she's going to meet the mother of this young man. So the mother says, well, I want to know about your family because I want my future daughter-in-law to come from a big family. And my mother says, look, I lost 119 family members. I don't have any family except my twin who just got married. Well, the future mother-in-law breaks off the engagement. My mom's heartbroken. So now I'm going to kind of put the story together. So Uncle Shlomo, the one that killed the Nazi, is now working for Ma'ariv, an Israeli newspaper. My mom would never tell the story, so with her blessing, I tell you this story. So my dad is now a pharmacist in Terre Haute, Indiana, and so he visits Leo, who lives in Connecticut, to find a wife. Leo can't find him a wife. So now he goes to visit Shlomo. Shlomo's in the newspaper business. He puts a personal ad in the Ma'ariv newspaper and says, my brother, a Holocaust survivor, coming here to meet a wife. So my mom thinks, well, surely he's going to know what it's like to not come from a big family. So she responds to the ad. My dad spoke no Hebrew. My mom spoke no English. Third date, my dad asks my mom a question. She says yes. He puts a ring on their finger. They're engaged. True story. They had a ceremony on Dizengoff Street. My mom was a sergeant major. It took about 4 or 5 months to get out of the army. My dad's a pharmacist in Terre Haute. So my mom eventually flies the fall of 60 to New York. She lands in New York, and my Uncle Leo from West Hartford now and his wife speak no Hebrew. And that my mom has a cousin there who speaks Hebrew. Ruth, my Leo's wife, puts a corsage on my mom's lapel. My mom in Hebrew says, what is this stupid flower, to her cousin? Women in Israel apparently didn't wear corsages. And my mom says, I want to take the corsage off. And the cousin says, no, don't take it off. you'll insult your future in-laws. When you get to the restaurant, say hot, hot. So she gets to the restaurant and says hot, hot, takes the jacket off. Everybody orders steak. Everybody orders steak well. When it comes to my mom, she wanted to sound very debonair, so she said, well, well. When the steak came out, it was like a brick. You couldn't cut through it. My mom calls my dad in Terre Haute, again with dictionaries on both sides of the phone. And my dad says, all my friends, Eva, all my friends are going to throw you a shower. My mom's reading dictionary. Maybe it's a mikvah. And then she reads and sees shower and gets very embarrassed. And she says, Mickey, tell your friends, their wives, thank you very much, but I take shower alone. That was my mom's first day in the United States. And as you can see from this slide, I was born a couple years later. My sister was born. She's 2 years younger. My first language in Terre Haute, Indiana was not English. It was Hebrew because my mom spoke Hebrew. I have a friend who's still in Terre Haute. We played in the sandbox. He's not Jewish. I think he knows 4 words from when we played in the sandbox together. So by the time I was 5 years old, my dad says, we got to teach this kid how to speak English. And my mom, when my dad was at work, usually probably around when I was 2 years old, every day she would watch this movie at 12 noon. And she would write down words, love, kiss, car, hug. My dad would come home from a pharmacy and said, Mickey, what are these words? And my mom said, well, I need to know what these words are. And my dad said, what are you watching? Oh, it's a movie that comes on every day at 12 noon. And my dad says, no, I think it's a soap opera. And my mom said, no, there's no soap. Well, that's how my mom learned how to speak English, read English and speak English. So, for me, I thought I had a normal childhood. Every couple years, we'd go to Israel. I was in Sunday school. By the time I was in 5th grade, a couple of bad things happened along the way. When I was in 5th grade during Halloween, during this time of year, kids in Terre Haute, Indiana would throw corn kernels at the house and run to the next house. I didn't think it was a big deal because I knew kids talked about it at school. Well, when the corn hit the door and the windows, it sounded like a bomb. My mom said, what is that? I said, the kids are just corning the house. Well, it brought back terrible memories for my mother. Terrible memories. And so the next day, she would hide in front of our front tree and chase these kids, my classmates, around the neighborhood. My mom would call their parents and said, can't Mike and Eric take it easy? Oh, Eva, they're just having fun. Nobody knew about the Holocaust. This is 1972. And so one day, I was coming home from a PTA meeting, 12 years old. We have a swastika on our house. Go home, dirty Jew. I didn't know what a dirty Jew was. I had to ask my parents. I had no idea. So for 2 Octobers in a row, this happened, and it was pure nightmare for my mom. My dad would tell my mom, why can't you ignore this? And my mom said, I can't ignore this because my father didn't ignore this. And so finally, the 3rd year, my mom got the bright idea that flights to Israel were cheap. So the whole month of October, she would fly and see Miriam and other relatives. They would throw corn at the house. My dad would just turn the light off and take a nap, and quickly the fun died out. And so along the way, in 1984, my mom met another twin. We would go to Israel every couple years and see Dota Miriam and the other relatives. So we knew Miriam, very well. And another twin knew another twin. So 1984, my mom found candles, Children of Auschwitz, Nazi Deadly Lab Experiment Survivors. Well, of course, because, she was always impressed when she got a letter in the mail from a president of an organization. She named herself president. My aunt was vice president. And they found 122 twins around the world alive and willing to participate. In 1985, this is my first trip back to Auschwitz. I was 24 years old. I never had textbooks about the Holocaust. My parents were my textbooks. And so I knew where everything was. I knew where my mom's barracks, selection platform. It was very odd. And now I think I've been to Auschwitz over 30 times. But over the next several years, continued bad things happened. First of all, The next week after the union in 1985, we had a mock trial of Mengele at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. And my mom saw a lot of the other twins that my aunt had kind of found in Israel. And a lot of them were starting to have health problems. Unfortunately, one of these health problems affected my aunt. And let me take one step back. In 1987, the same year I had cancer, my aunt was going into kidney failure. And so my mom knew they were an identical match. And so in 1987, my mom flew to Israel and donated one of her kidneys to my aunt. When they took the kidney out of my aunt's body, unfortunately, it had not developed beyond the age of 10. When my aunt, as I mentioned earlier, was in isolation, they injected her with something that stunted the growth of at least one of her kidneys. For 2 years, my aunt did really, really well. And then in 1991, she started developing urinary tract polyps. We got her, the same doctor that treated me and Lance Armstrong, who happened to be Jewish, brought my mom to Indianapolis. She had metastases all over her lungs. She had urinary bladder cancer, and she survived an extra year and died in June of 1993. My mom was heartbroken, terrified. And you know, when things go bad and then they get worse, how do you respond? And I think it's a lesson for anybody, whether you're 12 years old or you're 72 years old. I think it's the true human spirit. How do you pick yourself off the mat? So a couple of months later, I think my mom was lacking focus in her life. She gets a really strange phone call. Dr. John Mihalchik, who I had dinner with last night, calls my mom. He's a professor, a PhD, medical ethics, Boston College. And he says, Eva, I'm really sorry to hear about Miriam, but we're doing a medical ethics conference here in Boston, and would you like to start lecturing again? Would you want to lecture to doctors? And my mom said, oh, I love to lecture to doctors. They think they know everything. I have a friend here who's a doctor. And, And so she said, I love lecturing to doctors. They think they know everything. I'd like to tell the good doctors what I know. And so he said, okay, well, great. The meeting's in a couple of months. And then he says something strange. He said, look, Eva, maybe you could bring with you one of those Nazi doctors to the meeting. And my mom says, Dr. Mihalchik, where do you think I could find one of those guys? The last time I looked, they were not advertising in the phone book, the yellow pages. I know you kids don't know what yellow pages are. And so Dr. Mihalchik said, well, Eva, I think you'll think of something. And so the last project that my mom worked on with my aunt was for ZDF, a German network. And when the final cut of the documentary came out, there was a Nazi doctor named Hans Munch who worked alongside Mengele. He refused to do selections. He helped save 20-some Jewish doctors. And my mom said, oh, that could be the guy. He'll come to Boston. So she called the family of the Munch family, and the response was, he'll give you an interview, Eva, but he's not coming to Boston. You got to go to Germany. My mom was terrified to go back to Germany. If she just heard German on a plane, she would freak out. So a Dutch TV crew, we had friends, said, well, we'll go with you, Eva. So they went to Dr. Munch's house, very middle class, and my mom was already thinking ahead. She thought, well, surely he knows what Dr. Mengele did to us. He worked nearby next to Dr. Mengele. Surely he would know, so I can help the other twins avoid the same predicament, the same fate as my sister, as my mom's sister. First question, the camera rolling, Dr. Munch, what do you know about Dr. Mengele's experiments? Eva, I don't know anything. He kept everything to himself, but I have nightmares. My mom said, whoa, you have nightmares. I thought we were the ones with the nightmares. Why do you have nightmares? Well, beyond the 20-some Jewish doctors I helped save, I would stand outside the gas chamber. When the last body stopped moving, I would sign one certificate, one death certificate. And my mom, he went on to describe in great detail the operation of the camp, the operation of the medical experiments, everything. And my mom was a very quick thinker. And this is the fall of 1993. And my mom said, Dr. Munch, for the world that thinks the Holocaust either didn't occur or is minimizing it. Maybe it really wasn't 6 million. For all those people that are Holocaust revisionists, would you come with us to Auschwitz in 1995 for the 50th anniversary to tell the world what you just told me? He said, of course. So my mom came back to Terre Haute, told me this story, and I said, Mom, you should not bring a Nazi doctor to Auschwitz for the 50th anniversary. I don't care what you think, but now I need to figure out a way to thank him. How do you thank a Nazi doctor? I said, I don't know. So my mom went to the local Hallmark card shop in Terre Haute, Indiana for 2.5 hours looking for a thank you card for a Nazi doctor. Nothing seemed appropriate. My parents didn't drink alcohol much. You went to a local liquor store. Nothing seemed appropriate. For months before January of 1995, she would think, how can I thank him? What's the best gift I could give him? She decided, she tells me, okay, in my name only, and I stress that, in my name only, I'm going to thank Dr. Munch. The way I'm going to thank him is I'm going to forgive him for being a Nazi. I said, Mom, not a good idea. I don't care what you think. This is a gift I am giving to him. Now I need to prepare a document. I want to make sure I have no spelling mistakes. So she takes it to her local English professor. She just got her college degree in 1990. And so she says, Dr. Kaufman, I need you to review this for spelling mistakes. And Dr. Kaufman looks at it and says, Eva, there's no mistakes, but I think you're forgiving the wrong guy. No, I want to thank Dr. Munch. I want to give him a gift, the highest honor I can give another human being in my name only. Well, think about it. So sure enough, January 27th, 1995, Dr. Munch and my mom, this is en route to the ceremony, which ruins at the gas chamber. And I stress this, Dr. Munch knew nothing about my mom's thank you. He told the world exactly what he had told my mom in his living room. And then my mom surprised him and said, I'm going to thank you, and the way I'm going to thank you in my name only is I'm giving you a gift, and this is a gift that I forgive you for being a Nazi. My mom knew immediately that she had given Dr. Munch a gift. Not till months later, to the summer of 1995, she didn't realize until then that she had also given herself a gift. She no longer hated her mom, hated her dad, hated herself for hating her parents. So she decided to forgive herself, her mom, her dad, Dr. Mengele, all in her name only. And then she said, I want to forgive all Nazis in my name only. That part I get, completely subject to debate. And I asked my mom, aren't you opening up a can of worms? And she said, Alex, yes, but I don't want another Nazi doctor coming forth in a couple years and say, well, I worked alongside Mengele. I want you to forgive me too. She wanted to move forward, and I truly believe it made her a happier, healthier person and gave her another 24 years of her life. My mom liked to have fun. You can't really see it, but the picture in the middle, she was on Twitter. Back then, I was still single, still Jewish, still looking like I am now. So that was, it says soulmate on the bottom of her feet. She had some interesting friends, and I can tell you the Nikki Sixx story if you want. Ed Asner, Elliot Gould. Thank you very, very much, and I look forward to your questions. And it's been a real honor, and I hope you young people understand what I talked about. Thank you.
I would encourage you, Alex has told us maybe a third of the book, because there's so much more in the book, and I power read it, and it's all right. You ready for some questions?
Sure. And Graham can maybe have questions for me and or Graham. And I hope these two tables have some questions. I know you have to leave at 8 o'clock, right? Okay. So we can answer anything. So happy to answer from the adults or the young people. No questions? So if there are no questions, I start telling jokes, and then Graham says,
Please ask questions.
oh, go ahead.
Do you know of any specific things your mother or your aunt was injected with? Or was that all kept secret?
Wow, tough question right off the bat. We don't really know exactly what was injected. One twin was injected with bad things that affected their kidney and liver. The other twin would be placebo, meaning a control. They were not injected with anything. My mom was typically the one that got injected with all the bad things. My aunt was a control, except because I told you my mom was injected, and then Mengele looked at her and said, too bad, she only has 2 weeks to live. But when my mom was in the barracks, they thought my mom was going to die. And so they started injecting my aunt thinking that she would die. We don't know specifically. It's a great question you ask. Years ago, my mom, we were there with our group at Auschwitz, and we went to a lab, and they said, we have something special to show you, Eva. The Bayer Corporation, which some of you probably know, during the war changed their name to IG Farben. The Bayer Corporation, like you take Bayer aspirin, was sponsoring the experiments done on the twins. And so they came out with vials with fluid from, this is probably 2012, from the experiments. My mom begged them to analyze the fluid, and they never did. They were taken from the lab. They had found those years earlier, and they knew my mom was coming. Every time my mom came, something like this happened. But we never found out. And to your question, my mom was on a search to her dying day to try to help a lot of the Mengele twins, because little by little, usually one of the two twins would have kidney or liver problems. And if you know medicine, when you take any type of drug, it's metabolized by your kidney and liver. And so, great question. How old are you, like 25? Great question.
Alex, would you talk a little bit about the museum, please?
So, in 1993, my aunt passed away. My mom wanted to do something in my aunt's memory. So Indiana did not have a Holocaust museum. So literally with a very grassroots effort, my mom was in real estate. She found a building on a major thoroughfare, rented part of it out, eventually decided to buy it all out. And so Candles Holocaust Museum was born. We just celebrated the 30th anniversary in April. They've had, I can't remember, Graham knows more, but we've had thousands of visitors, kids come, people come from all over the world. And we have a lot of big plans. We have, and I don't know if you know this, in 2013, the USC Show Foundation was creating Dimensions and Testimony, which is a hologram. You guys know what holograms are? So my mom was one of the holograms, which is a funny story, but she became one of the holograms. So my mom, when the hologram was created, used to have arguments with herself. She would talk to herself and ask her questions. And I can give you, if you want to talk to my mom, it's a little eerie, but for me it's really cool because I can still talk to my mom. But we have a theater where you can interact with my mom and a lot of the other initial Dimensions and Testimony holograms. And for me it's very special. My sister never liked it even when my mom was alive, but I still love it. So that's a little bit about.
And are the books going to be funding?
The books half of the proceeds go to the museum, half go to her scholarship at Butler. One really quick comment, I want to be respectful of time. We have a chapter on this, but in 2003, the museum was burned to the ground by white supremacists. Point being that, again, the core family, like many, even when they were liberated and went to America, the hatred and the anti-Semitism didn't cease, right? To his parents' credit, they started rebuilding it the next day, and with the help of the community, Terre Haute had really embraced this family by that time. They rebuilt it. It's now in its 30th year.
So yeah, the proceeds from the book go to a scholarship that Graham and I created at my alma mater where he works, and the other proceeds, the other half, go to Candles Holocaust Museum. But any other questions? Yes, sir, Dr. Merrill.
It's known now that Israel had good lead on capturing Mengele and bringing him back to Israel, but it was felt at the time they had lots of other issues to deal with. It wasn't a priority. Did your mom ever talk about that? Did she ever express an opinion about what that would have been? Or
Well, they were in pursuit of Eichmann, and at the same time they found Mengele, and then Mengele went back into hiding. I don't remember, that was in the early 60s, but I can tell you that, I'll change your question a little bit. When my mom, after she found the candles, particularly in the late 80s, we were getting phone calls at our house a couple times a year, we think Mengele's in Las Vegas. We think Mengele's in Florida. And I thought she was in quicksand. She was not making any progress on any of this. And we kept on, well, we need to find Mengele. I said, Mom, we don't think, how would you know that he's alive? His bones were found in June of 1985. Supposedly those were his bones. This was after the mock trial of Mengele in January of 85. And so my mom didn't believe those were his bones. I don't know if any other doctors are here, but when he was a young child, he had hematologic osteomyelitis of the femur, a bone infection. And when they found the bones in Brazil, those bones did not have any evidence of the hematologic, a defect in the femur. And so my mom took a second mortgage on the house, brought in experts from all over the world to Terre Haute, and they disputed the findings of 3 countries, Argentina, Israel, and Germany, and the United States. I don't know if you know this part, Keith, but when my mom met with Dr. Munch in 1993, supposedly Mengele died in even before, he was really 79, the bones were discovered in 85. In the early 90s, Mengele's attorney came to Munch's house and said, Dr. Munch, if Mengele were on trial, would you testify on his behalf? And Munch said, well, wait, you want me to testify on a dead body? Because supposedly he found it very ironic that they came to him. And so it was one thing after another, but for a long time my mom wanted to find out the results to her question, what was injected, so she could help the other twins. And in her mind, she needed to find Mengele. So I know I didn't answer your question directly, but it's a great question. Any other questions? Yes, Rabbi.
I'm working off my chocolate. Thank you.
Like Phil Donahue.
Thank you so much. You shared that both of your parents before the Holocaust came from observant Jewish families. I'm curious what their Jewish identity was like after the Shoah, after the Holocaust, and how it might have affected your own Jewish identity.
I got the same question today at Hillel at Brown. We were raised to be Jewish. I was bar mitzvahed. We did not keep kosher at my house. I've not done a study, but both my parents, as you mentioned, as I mentioned, came from very religious families. My mom always held it against her father that she was told to pray instead of to flee. And so when my sister and I were born, in her mind, religion caused her to be an orphan. And so it was her mind that for most of her life, she said, look, I'll go to synagogue, but we're not going to keep kosher. You know, we had Shabbat dinner every Friday night. But ironically, later in life, she became very, very spiritual. And once she kind of rethought everything, this is toward the end of her life, she thought, you know, there must be, because for many years she told me she didn't believe in God. But then she started thinking, well, how in the world did Dr. Michalczyk, there were so many strange events that occurred for her to come down the path of journey of healing, one of which is Dr. Michalczyk asking her to find a Nazi doctor. And she thought, you know, maybe there's got to be a higher being, because it led me to being happy at the end of my life. And so I've met many of the Mengele twins. Those are most of my experiences with survivors. And by no means have I done a study, but a lot of the Mengele twins that were not very observant, not very religious before the war, after the war they became very religious because in their mind they survived because they believed in God. My mom and my dad, and I know plenty of other Mengele twins, were very religious and observant before the war, not so after the war. So it's probably the best answer I can give you. But it's a great question, and ironically, as I said, I got the same question earlier.
Hi, I'm Isabel. I'm also a fellow Hoosier from the DeR region, Crown Point, Valparaiso area. Graduate at Purdue. I did tour Indiana State, and I'm very familiar with Butler's campus from Science Olympiad. I wanted to ask a question. I was introduced to your mom's story through an exhibit. I'm pretty sure it was at the Indiana Historical Society in Indianapolis. It was an incredible exhibit, and I wanted to know, what is your favorite memory of your mom?
Favorite memory of my mom? Well, I'll tell you this. You mentioned the exhibit. My favorite memory of my mom, and this is with hologram if you interacted. My mom loved the music, the song, To Dream the Impossible Dream, Man from La Mancha. And so that's probably my favorite memory. And one of the reasons is the day before she died at Auschwitz, at the iconic Beer Canal Gate, the LA Children's Chorus serenaded my mom with that song. And usually I cry. So that's my favorite memory. I'm going to tell one last story real quick. So my mom would tell you kids, she would tell, I too am prejudiced. And kids would say, wait, how can you be so prejudiced? You were just the victim of terrible anti-Semitism. Well, when I was your age, my sister and I could not go to any rock concerts because all the kids at rock concerts did drugs. I never went to one rock concert till late in college. So one time my mom was lecturing at a school, and there were 3 boys walking to the auditorium with torn jeans, long hair, tattoos, and their pants were, as my mom were cleaning the floor. One of them dropped a pencil, and my mom said he had the audacity to bend over to pick it up. I saw things I've never seen before. Use your imagination. And so she then tells the teachers, oh, those must be your drug addicts, right? And she said, no, Eva, they're our valedictorians. One's going to Harvard, Yale, and Duke. And my mom said, really? And then she started thinking, she too should not judge people on their appearance. She too should judge people on their content or their character, their actions, etc. So my mom, thanks to our friend Ted Green, was a Grand Marshal in the 500, the big auto race in Indianapolis. We're on the red carpet before the race. Jake Gyllenhaal, the actor, is right, and all the cameras are on him. Out comes this guy, and you saw his picture here. Out comes this guy. He kind of looked familiar. He had long hair, torn jeans, earrings, everything. And he looks at my mom and he says, hey, baby, let's take a picture. So now the cameras are on my mom and this guy. I take a step back, and he looks at me and goes, hey, man, take good care of her. And I'm looking, who is this guy? So we get up to the pagoda to watch the race, and on the Indy Star website it says, only at the Indy 500 would you have Holocaust survivor and Grand Marshal Eva Kor with Motley Crue's Nikki Sixx. He's a rock and roll singer. You don't know him, but trust me. And so my mom then tweeted him later, dear Mr. Sixx, how can I become a rock star like you? Nikki tweets back, Eva, my dear, you've been a rock star your whole life. And so she ended up going out to California to be on his radio show. And I said, Mom, these are the guys that you would not let me. Oh, he needs help. I need to forgive him, or he needs to forgive himself. My mom was having shoulder problems. And so later, a couple months later, I said, Mom, how's your shoulder doing? She said, Alex, it's so much better. Nikki's been giving me this stuff called CBD oil. It works great. Thank you so much. We'll be up here to sign books. Thank you. One last thing.
Very last thing. We've been ending these with an announcement about the book. We found out 6 months ago it's going to be adapted into a motion picture, which is very exciting for us. Thank you. We're going to be doing a casting call after this, so get ready to act. We're not sure if Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise is going to play Alex, but the goal is 2028 to have this out in the theaters, and the most important thing is this provides another medium to get this story out to, again, this won't be a documentary, it'll be a motion picture. We're moving to the investment phase right now, and so thank you again for having us. It was a real honor to be here. We really appreciate it. Have a great night.
That was amazing.